Hey everybody, Nick here from another BookTube channel, and today I'll be talking about White Sand by Brandon Sanderson. White Sand is a comic series published in 3 volumes by Dynamite Entertainment. The story is by Brandon Sanderson, but has been adapted to the comic book format by Rick Hoskin. The artwork for the first 11 issues was done by Julius Gopez, with the final 6 issues being done by Fritz Cassis. There's also one random issue in the middle done by Julius Ota. The story takes place on the planet of Taldane, which is part of Sanderson's cosmere. One side of the planet is perpetually in daytime, leaving the other side always in night. For obvious reasons, the inhabitants of this planet call one half day side and the other dark side. These Taldanians are not terribly original. Taldane is home to the Sandmasters, an order of secretive and solitary magic users who can manipulate the white sands of the planet in various ways. This magic comes at a cost, though, as manipulating the sand causes the user to become dehydrated. There is also mentioned in Volume 1 an ability called slatrification, in which the Sandmasters can turn sand into water, but this never comes up again, and according to the Coppermind wiki, this was added to the comic in error and was removed for the Omnibus edition. Kenton is half Daysider, half Darksider, and though his father is the Lord Maestral of the Sandmasters, he has very little magic ability. Nevertheless, Kenton defies his father's warnings about joining the Sandmasters and enters their ranks. At his advancement ceremony, enemy Curtsian warriors attack and are able to wipe out nearly the entire order of Sandmasters. Kenton survives, and he takes up the mantle of Lord Maestral in an attempt to rebuild the guild with the few members remaining, while at the same time trying to convince the ruling body called the Taishin to not dissolve the order completely. You can always rely on Brandon Sanderson to come up with a cool, hard magic system to anchor a story and world. Sand Mastery has a lot of visual appeal, and making the drawback be dehydration feels appropriate considering the desert-like setting of Dayside. Unfortunately, that's about the only positive thing I have to say about White Sand. Kenton is not a terribly interesting protagonist. His initial characterization is one of stubborn defiance to prove his father wrong and show that he's worthy of entering the Sandmaster's ranks. But that's about all we really get from him before the big surprise attack, which wipes out most of the guild, leaving him in charge. From there, the story shifts to him just visiting different characters and pestering them to please not break up his social club. While the Sandmasters are cool, they never really give us any reason to root for them here. The Sandmasters, other than Kenton, especially the leaders, are shown to be abrasive and unwilling to help others. The entire series is Kenton begging to let the guild continue to function, and I'm just sitting here reading it like, why? I thought Chrysala from Darkside was pretty interesting, and I almost wish that the entire comic was with her as the main character rather than Kenton. She has a much stronger story to drive her forward as she's venturing to an unfamiliar land to fulfill her late fiancé's goal of finding a mythical guild of magicians. That's a fun story I can get behind. While the plot of White Sand wasn't too impressive, it's the artwork here that really took me out of it. I've got a lot of problems with the art, so buckle up and let's take a closer look. Okay, so this is some Julius Gopez artwork from White Sand, Volume 1, and his style isn't bad. He is obviously a very good artist. He has a more rendered art style. There's a lot of little marks that are adding a lot of detail to the world. So from that perspective, he's doing a good job. But just look at these panels here. Look at this page. Look at these 2 pages. Look at these 2 pages. What stands out to you? That's right. Nothing. Nothing stands out to you. It is, because of the world that they're in, it is nothing but white sand. And they, the main characters, the Sandmasters, are all wearing white robes that are the same color. Because, I mean, yeah, I guess they're going for a camouflage kind of thing, but this is a visual medium, and you need something interesting visually to make these pop out a bit more. All we have are white sand, white robes, kind of boring brown rocks, and a little bit of yellow, which is also a bit muted from their belts. Like, there's no real interesting color on a lot of these pages. And that's really more at the feet of the colorist rather than the artist. Because, I mean, a page like this is a really well-drawn page. This is really well composed. It looks really nice. But why is the blood not the most read thing on these pages? We've got the red from these tents. Why? Why not make this blood pop so much more? Because we've been setting up so much bland white nothingness and brown. Give us that red pop of the blood to really sell this massacre. I don't know, just decisions like that. Everything here just kind of looks muddy and boring. This is also something that really bothered me throughout all 3 volumes of White Sand, which is these ridiculous panel borders. Why is everything so jagged throughout this series? Every single panel, there's not a square panel to be found. And there are reasons that you do that in a comic. There's storytelling reasons to do it, but it's every single page. Like, this is something that you would want to do for a chaotic action sequence or something. But they're sitting in a room. Like, this is a quiet room with a fireplace and nice chairs. Like, there's nothing chaotic going on in these scenes here. So why on earth is the layout drawing our eyes in all these ridiculous directions and making us do all of this work to understand how we're supposed to read this comic? This is also an example of the artist doing something absolutely ridiculous. This is a cardinal sin, in my opinion, of visual storytelling, and that's telling the reader with directional arrows how they are supposed to read these panels. If you're doing your job as an artist, we don't need you to tell us how to read the panels. Our eyes tell us how to read the panels just by knowing how to flow through the page. If you need to go out of your way to tell us, okay, you got to read this one next, and then read this one, and then read this one, you did a bad job. Change your layout. Do something different. This is not how things should work. This is how they did things in the golden age of comics, before the language of visual storytelling, of comic storytelling was really figured out. When they were still trying to figure out the basics, they would do stuff like this. But we know how to do this now. There's no excuse for using directional arrows to lead the reader. This is another example of it. There's more directional arrows where we're going from the top panel, down one, up right, and then down again. Why? This is a 4-panel sequence with one wide panel on top. Tell me why you couldn't just start with the wide panel, and then this panel, and then just put this panel here, and then put this panel here. Now you've got yourself a very easy to read storytelling flow. Like, it's just so basic. It just doesn't make any sense why these are switched. It does not make any sense to me, and it drove me insane reading this book. So this is an action sequence from volume 2, and I think it highlights pretty well how difficult to read these action sequences are. The sand mastery as it's being displayed doesn't really read very well. Like, this is supposed to be the sand. It just looks like big ribbons of light, which they do describe the sand as ribbons, but your premise is that you're a sand master, not a light master. Find a way to show this as sand. Also, just going from panel to panel, following what characters are doing in relation to each other is really confusing. And I think it's so confusing, it actually confused the letterer on this page here. So take a look here. These two characters are back to back fighting off these Kurtzian invaders, these attackers here. And they're bantering back and forth. And we get to this panel here, and there's a word bubble that's attributed to this blue-robed character here. But what they are saying is part of their dialogue. Like, after this line here, that's the next logical line, and then it's continued here. But these word bubbles obviously are attributed to them, but this one is very clearly being attributed to this figure here. And at first, I thought the colorists got confused because I thought maybe they colored Kenton's robe blue by mistake instead of white, but you could see Kenton in the background here with this character. And also in this foreground here, you can see that they've got this little arrow mechanism on their wrist, which Kenton doesn't have. So this is an enemy. This is not either of them. But the word bubbles being associated to them, I think the letterer got confused and just put the word bubble there because they had no idea what was going on in this sequence. By the time we get to Volume 3, the art's handed over to Fritz Cassis, and his style is very different. Obviously, there's a lot less rendering that's going on to create detail, and it doesn't look bad, but the figure work is a little stiff. Like, just some of these poses here just don't seem very relaxed. And these panels are super boring. I mean, look at how boring these panels are. It's just characters, it's just everyone is just upright in frame. There's no interesting camera angles that we're looking at here. It's just people walking, people standing, people walking, people standing. Look, arms outstretched, just stiff. I don't know. There's just nothing going on here. Like, this is boring. This is boring storytelling. There's also a really weird decision here to make most of the Daysiders white and the Darksiders black, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Like, Sanderson's worlds are really well thought out, and the way that his humans and animals and plants all evolve to suit their unique world is truly incredible. But like with this, we don't need to speculate on how sun exposure would affect skin evolution. We know this. The higher the sun exposure, the higher evolution of melanin pigment in your skin, which leads to darker skin. So why would the Daysiders be the white ones here? It just doesn't make sense that this decision was made, and it really bothered me. I honestly found it very difficult to even finish White Sand because I was not feeling the story at all, and the art did absolutely nothing to help. If this were a comic on my pull list, I would have yanked it after the conclusion of the first story arc. I only recommend White Sand if you are a Cosmere completionist, but you could also probably just get away with reading the Coppermind wiki. My arbitrary and subjective grade for White Sand is 3 out of 10. Do with that what you will. Where does White Sand rank for you in terms of the Cosmere? Let me know in the comments. Thank you for spending some time with me today, but now it's time to get back to reading.